Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Mythgard Movie Club. I'm Maggie Parke, director of Mythgard and pretty much all-around geek, and I like to chat film with folks. And I'm joined today by Gabriel Schenk and Stephen Massey, who will introduce themselves in a moment. And we'll shortly be joined by my partner, Alistair McLean, as well. And we are discussing The Batman 2021 film, so by Matt Reeves. We'll go through that in a minute, but I want to just introduce the people in the room. So Gabriel, let's start with you because you are the one that said, hey, Maggie, I think we should talk about this. So
yeah, well, I've been looking forward to this film since it was announced, following everything since 2019, I think is when they started releasing some stuff. My name's Gabriel. I teach at Signum University, mainly on the master's degree program in literature and language. And I've been a Batman fan since really the Christopher Nolan film. So I'm quite recent, actually. I grew up with it wasn't Tim Burton, was it? It was the Joel Schumacher by the time I was a kid, sort of Batman takes and what's his face? Not Val Kilmer, the one after that, the George Clooney. Yeah, exactly. So I kind of grew up with Batman being a bit silly. I actually remember watching the Adam West Batman, which I quite liked as a kid on TV, and it's very charming. But when I saw Batman Begins, I was kind of blown away by that, which was the first Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale Batman. I did not realize that Batman could be this good. And then, of course, I read as many comics as I could get my hands on, yet to read a bad Batman comic. I played all the Arkham games, which I love, went back and watched all the movies I could. Did, extra work like reading things like The Long Halloween and Hush and The Killing Joke and stuff like that, kind of the classics of the genre. And I heard that maybe The Long Halloween would be an influence on the Batman. So kind of did some homework to prep for that. So I love Batman. I love all that stuff, and excited to talk about the film.
Yay. Thank you, Gabriel. Stephen, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Massey, and I've been a Batman fan my whole life. Growing up in Hammond, Indiana, when I was old enough to finally get an allowance, I would say I was going to an ice cream store, but I would actually sneak around the corner to the comic book shop, and I would just buy Batman comics. And Batman's been my favorite superhero as long as I can remember. I came into the Batman film world through Tim Burton's '89 film, which is amazing. Especially the score, Danny Elfman's score, really drew me into the film. And actually, I think I've had to buy that album 3 times. I enjoy it so much. I have a bachelor's of student ministry from Ozark Christian College, and my appreciation for Batman and all things nerd have really helped me connect with students. And I'm excited to be here today, not just to talk about why I really like this film and why I like Batman in general, but I'm ready to learn something new. I know someone is going to have a fresh new take or a new perspective, and I'm just really anxious to hear this and then go back after we're done and rewatch the movie again. I'm ready.
I'm genuinely excited about this conversation. I am with all of our movie clubs, but I'm like you guys. This has been part of my family, in my movie family, and my growth as a film person for a long time, even if just quietly in the background. So I don't have the same in-depth knowledge as these two, but my brother was obsessed, and he was 6 years older than me. So of course I idolized him when I was little. So therefore I idolized Batman, and he collected everything you could possibly get your hands on for Batman. So we just had Batman crap all over the house. And he still has a box of Batman cereal from 1989, unopened. Oh yeah, I'm sure that's real fresh. So I also started with the Michael Keaton Batmans, and certainly enjoyed those. Was definitely at peak teenage girl with the Val Kilmer Batman Forever and things like that. So that hit right. I mean, Kiss Upon a Rose was my anthem. So definitely hit that ilk. But with you, Gabriel, it was very much when Christopher Nolan's films came out that I was like, oh, this is how we can tell this story. that really changed my perspective on how to engage with this character and took it out from being something that was a, not cliche, because I think that has really negative connotations on it, but it is a really expected superhero film, and turned it into this darker drama with a hero that we thought we knew, but told in such a different way. Absolutely love the Christopher Nolan one. So, and that also like taught me a lot about film and how to tell a story visually and things like that. So I really respect those films, my own personal growth, but also like what they did for the genre and how many people got on board because of that and stuff. But it's also been fun to see the stuff after that, you know, like Justice League and Birds of Prey and Batman versus Superman and all these other kind of reiterations we've had. So we'll talk a little bit about the journey of Batman and how this one fits in. But I'll just give a tiny bit of background first about the Batman. Let me share my screen so we've got a picture up. So I'm just going to give the like, what is this film? And then we'll all just start talking about it.
And just on the point of hearing other people's opinions, I agree with you, Stephen. It'd be great to hear people in the room, live in the Zoom room. If you've got any questions or comments, use the chat function, I think, which I think you can do. I don't think there's a question function, but use the chat. And people on YouTube, if you leave a comment, tell us what you thought of the film. I'd love to read those as well, whether you agree with us or disagree.
We do read them, so more than happy to respond to those as they come up. All right. The problem is if I share my screen now, I can't look at my notes. So you guys can help me fill in the details here. But the Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, written as well with his writing partner, Peter Craig. Matt Reeves, most known for Planet of the Apes, I would say. I think before that, see, this is what happens when I don't have my notes in front of me. It would be the kind of cult horror film that he did.
Let Me In?
No, that one was amazing. Okay, Let Me In was a whole thing though, because like Let the Right One In blew my absolute mind. And then Let Me In, I enjoyed, but I think I had already been smitten by the original. So the remake I found a little bit more horrific and difficult. Cloverfield is what I'm thinking. Sorry. Cloverfield is what I was thinking of. Let Me In is kind of an indie-esque vampire film. So it has the same kind of, I don't know, enigmatic kind of lead that you don't quite know the story that's going on. So I feel like a lot of the techniques that he used in Let Me In, you can see throughout his subsequent films, definitely in Cloverfield, burying the lead, hiding the monster and all of that. And then moving into Planet of the Apes, which I feel like is kind of like against type from what he was doing, but leads really well into the bigger Hollywood flicks. And then moving into the Batman. Do either of you have comments about just his journey as a director?
Yeah, I've never seen any of his other work, actually. I know, you know, he's very famous for the Planet of the Apes stuff. But I was really impressed by him, and I was really impressed by the way he engaged with the fans as well, all the way through the development of the Batman.
Also uniquely with him, he was the director behind Felicity, that like 1990s TV show with, I forget her name too, lead actress in that. But it was on for 8 years, massively popular. And he did that with J.J. Abrams. I didn't realize that was J.J. Abrams. So very surprising for that path. And he wrote with Peter Craig, who's known for The Town. He wrote Mockingjay 1 and 2, which is the final installment of the Hunger Games series. He was the writer behind a couple of reboots, including Top Gun and Bad Boys for Life. So interesting to see this kind of established character, these guys taking on this mantle of carrying on the story, and moving it forward with Warner Brothers. Now, there's a lot of stuff before this happened. If you go to the Wikipedia page and Google it and things like that, you'll see that it was originally in development with Ben Affleck and bounced around a whole bunch and lots of different writers. This is not that film. I mean, I guess you could say it started as that film, but at any given time in the industry, there's probably about 37 different versions of a Batman film being developed. So this is not the exact one that started with Ben Affleck. This is kind of a reiteration of it. So this is with Warner Brothers because they own DC, obviously. The budget of the film, I just find budget really interesting. If anybody wants me to geek out and talk about that, I'm happy to. But in general, this is on the higher end of budgets with 185 to 200 million range, somewhere in there. Huge box office, especially for a post-pandemic film where we're not quite up to speed with a fully filled cinema stage. We've got 770 million in the worldwide intake, which is a very high number. Most films that are considered blockbusters would be between the 300 and 400 range. So it did just fine in the worldwide. And then filming locations, I just find these really interesting, especially upon rewatching it to see if I could pick anything out. Most of it's in London. There are a few bits in Liverpool. There's an abandoned hospital that's used in Scotland. And then some of the exteriors, they have used gorgeous CGI and have stitched things together between Chicago, New York, I think they said Pittsburgh, and also London. So they have built a city that looks very much like a New York, but it has architecture from a number of different places to kind of give it that realistic, but also kind of fantastic feel. Industrial Light and Magic was the special effects house behind it, who you'll know from Star Wars and many other things after that. And then Stephen, I think I'm going to turn to you for music, because I know this is your geekery element. Michael, I don't know how to say his last name either. Giacchino?
I think it's Giacchino, I think.
Giacchino? He's got a pretty good record as well. I just wrote on a few of them, but the breadth of his work I thought was really interesting. Speed Racer was the first one I clocked onto, because Speed Racer was the first film I geeked out about music with. I love Speed. And that's another comic book adaptation based on a comic from the 70s, question mark. But lots of CG in the early days of full CG films. And I really enjoyed Speed Racer. So it's fun to see his name on that. He also did the music for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is how I assume he knows Matt Reeves. He did the music for Rogue One, which is like when I need background music to just like work to, I put on the Rogue One soundtrack. It's just stunning. He also did Spider-Man No Way Home, which is a more recent one. Critical reception for the Batman, it ran the gamut. When you look at reviews, some people rank them in the 20 to 25 range and others rank a full 100 points. So all that does is tell me I really do not rate reviewers. This is my personal take, but I struggle with reviews. I think you need to figure out how you feel about the film, and a review can inform how you feel about a film, but don't read a review to find out if the film is good, because it runs the gamut. But the ones that I think are helpful are Metacritic, which is averaging of all the critical reviews, and it has a 77% on Metacritic. And then another obviously famous reviewer site is Rotten Tomatoes, and Rotten Tomatoes gives it 85% for audience reaction and 87% for critics reaction. Those are very high numbers. And as we talk, you'll see that I was very surprised by those numbers, because I didn't quite feel as strongly that it was that high. But what I would like us to chat about is how this fits into the world of Batman. This is just from a YouTuber, but I thought it was a pretty great infographic. We've had a lot of Batmans over time. So I thought maybe we could just talk a little bit about how this Batman fits into the world of Batman. But also, I just like kind of maybe before that, let's just do gut reactions of how you guys felt about this film. Like, do you think we can manage a 1 to 2 sentence reviewing thoughts?
I can try. I can try. I mean, I had
just call it like the headline of your review, and then the rest of this episode will be
okay. I had a big grin on my face when all the way through this film, when I watched in the cinema, even though it's not a film with a lot of jokes. It's about a lot of awful murders, but I still had a massive grin on my face all the way through. I just loved it. I thought this was the Batman film for me.
Okay. How about you, Stephen?
I am very pleased to see a Batman film that highlights his mental prowess and his ability to work very well with Sergeant, I think it's Lieutenant Gordon. Overall, I am very pleased with what we have on the screen. Very happy.
Cool. And I mean, immediately, I really enjoyed it visually. I loved this. And as a soundtrack, I loved it. So like in terms of like composition of a film, I loved it. Really beautiful. It felt like a film noir. You know, it had that kind of tone to it and the depth to it. I had some real problems with the structure and the pacing and the script and the performance and a few other things that we'll get into, but I would say I would probably fall above 50%, but way below 88%. So, what'd you love? What'd you hate? let's just dive in. Pick a thing that you want to discuss first, and we'll just run into it. I'll also just give like a tiny bit of background while you guys think about what you want to jump in with first. But like how this fits into the world of Batman, I thought was interesting. And he's only been doing the Batman thing for 2 years at this point in his life. So obviously he had tragedy when he was a child, lost his parents, but he's only been Batman for 2 years. And I also thought that was interesting with the title, The Batman, because he's not yet Batman. He's not known as Batman. He's known as the Batman, like, oh, that Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a pretty interesting thing to say. He's not quite there yet.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, he's called Vengeance a lot, like as a nickname throughout the film. Like people often refer to him as Vengeance, but then Alfred is
Vengeance.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a comic book reference as well. But Alfred, refers to him as the Batman, and it's an idea, right? I mean, at the end when he thinks that the Riddler knows who he is, and by the way, at this point, we should say we are going to be discussing spoilers.
Oh, spoilers.
Yeah,
guys,
yeah.
We've had months to watch this.
Exactly.
Sorry.
He says maybe this is the end of what? Of the Batman. It's like a kind of, it's like a project, the Batman project. But yeah, I mean, sorry, I just was responding just to what you were saying, but to expand on what we loved about it, I mean, I agree, Stephen. The cerebral nature of Batman. Finally, we're seeing Batman as detective, not just in a few scenes like we did with the Christopher Nolan films, but actually integral to the plot. Like this is a hard-boiled film noir detective story about solving murders. This was the rumor that Ben Affleck was going to do for his standalone Batman film, which was also rumored to be called The Batman. Following the convention at the moment of like the Suicide Squad, just stick a "the" in front of it. But it was great to see that detective side, which I don't think we've actually really seen on screen up until now.
I'm going to interrupt real quick. We've just been joined by Alistair McLean, my partner. Do you want to introduce yourself and say how you got into Batman?
I'm Alistair McLean. I'm a teacher by trade. Batman. My introduction to Batman is 60s TV series, then probably animated series. Then I saw Batman Returns first in the cinema, and then it was VHS then. I didn't actually see the first Nolan one in the cinema, but I saw the subsequent ones. And I didn't see this in the cinema because we couldn't see it because we were in lockdown. So there we go, yeah. So watched it, I think, 2.5 times now.
Would you call yourself a connoisseur?
I have opinions.
There we go. I've laid that groundwork. Excellent. Ooh. Right. All right, Stephen, what do you think about this in terms of where the Batman is at this point in his life?
So I enjoyed sort of like getting to hear his inner monologue that felt very much like a comic book to me. When you open up Detective Comics or Batman or Legends of the Dark Knight, you usually will have a monologue pretty early into the book. And so it was nice to make that comic book connection with his internal monologue. And even the fact that he was keeping a journal, I thought was kind of a cool touch. He's been doing it for 2 years. He says he hasn't really seen he doesn't feel like he's making any progress. So his solution then is to just be more of a vengeful Batman. And like, he's got a one-track mind. And he says in the movie, I don't care what happens to me. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to do it. And it's a very determined character. So he's got some experience under his belt, but man, he's got a long way to go before he can become truly effective.
And I guess that's one of the points that I got frustrated with it. The excuse is that he's young, maybe, that he's new to this, but you see determined and I see, I don't know, lame. Like, surely there's something else to do here. You have a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like an emo Batman.
Yeah, oh, totally.
And he's pretty sloppy, which I love. So, that when he goes into the nightclub and he gets beaten up when he the parachute deploys at the wrong moment and he gets beaten, dusted up it's such a nasty fall, which would probably kill him in real life. But anyway, year two is interesting. It hasn't been done as much as year one. Batman Begins kind of did year one, and there's a very famous comic series graphic novel called Batman Year One, which is quite similar to Batman Begins. Year two is quite a good time to join, I think. A, because then we don't have to see Thomas and Martha Wayne getting killed again. We don't have to explain who the Batman is. B, we don't have to see him making his suit or whatever. So we're kind of joining at a more interesting moment. I think this is the story of how the Batman really becomes, he develops from just a symbol of fear to a symbol of hope. Fear to his enemies, hope to the people he's trying to help. And so that's a really kind of engaging storyline that we wouldn't get with a year one story. This is, he's already the Batman, but he's working out what does that mean and developing his skills. He's still very skilled. I mean, I everyone's always worried whenever a new Batman becomes Batman, because, I love Ben Affleck, and I loved the way that Ben Affleck was the kind of Frank Miller version of Batman, and very much sort of following the visual cues from the Frank Miller Dark Knight series. And Robert Pattinson, or to give him his proper title, Pat, to follow the convention of Batfleck, Ben Affleck, did seem a little bit scrawny when he was first cast. And I remember staying up late at night for DC Fandom 2020 when Matt Reeves revealed the first trailer, even though they'd only filmed about a third of the film by that point. They'd had to shut down because of COVID. And they released this incredible trailer, and there's a bit in that when Batman beats the crap out of some thugs, and I was just cheering. I love this stuff. It's every geek's dream, isn't it? Beating up the bullies, and he beats the crap out of these thugs and says, "I'm vengeance." And I just thought, yes, that's Batman. He's there. So it is a sloppy Batman. It's an emo Batman. It's a grow up, spend your money on something that actually helps people Batman, but it is Batman, and he's working stuff out. And it's going to be fascinating to see where this Batman goes in future films. I hope we get sequels.
It's nice to hear your selling of it, because you were dubious and then gave in and said, yep, this is Batman. I also really like the humanizing elements that they did with him. There's this bit in the top image where the opening shot is on his back and covered in scars and scar tissue and things like that. And like you said, his parachute deployed at the wrong time. He definitely would have died, but we wouldn't have much of a film if that happened. And I do also love that moment on the rooftop where he deploys the suit and you see a smidge of fear, right? Like, he's like prepping himself to do this really scary thing. Those humanizing elements I thought was really good for connecting to this character that otherwise is really difficult to connect to. He's a billionaire, he's all these other things that separate him from us. So it was quite nice to have those humanizing moments. And
you have the black eye makeup as well, which is, I think, that for the first time ever on screen.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. I mean, there's a ridiculous bit in Batman versus Superman when Superman takes off Batman's cowl and sort of takes off all the black eye makeup as well. But I love just visually seeing Robert Pattinson with those panda eyes. And I think Matt Reeves has talked about the theatricality of that. It is like something backstage that an actor would do. So I love that humanizing element as well.
There's definitely parts I loved about it. I also struggled with him, which I'm happy to admit. So obviously I know Robert Pattinson from back in my Twilight days, and I don't feel like he grew much between playing that role and playing this role, but I know he has, because his other performances in other films between those two films were outstanding. But this, I almost felt like he just reverted back to being that one-note vampire, and that bothered me. I mean, I guess it helps to hear you guys say like he's figuring himself out and stuff, but it just felt like this the entire time. There was no range, even when he was like making out with Catwoman, which we'll get to, because I really had an issue with that too. But like, I didn't feel there was any chemistry or any need for them to kiss. And then when they just kissed, it was like a homework assignment. Opinions.
Yeah. I mean, I think this isn't an original point to me. This is a point I took from a podcast, Mr. Sunday Movies. but they were talking about how this is the first ever Batman film, as in this is a film actually about Batman. Batman is the central character. Usually there's Bruce Wayne and he's the central character, and then he plays as Batman sometimes. Here, there's really no difference between Bruce Wayne and Batman. And you even get a kind of in between Batman, Bruce Wayne at a few times when he just puts a hood on and a cap and he does stuff basically as Batman, which is how I imagine he was in year one, maybe before he developed the suit. But he's going back, he's kind of reverting back to that. And then there's scenes when he's Bruce Wayne, and there's a very telling moment when he's looking at the son of the mayor as Batman, and then later on he sees the son of the mayor again at the funeral, the memorial service, and he's just exactly the same. He's just staring, there's nothing, he's dead inside, both as Batman as Bruce Wayne. So there is a little less depth and variety than in other Batman performances where you do have Bruce Wayne and you do have Batman. But I liked that, and I think when you're looking at the performance, it's thinking about what Batman is doing is part of the performance, when usually it's kind of like we divide these characters up. We think about the Bruce Wayne performance more than the Batman performance. Here there's just one complete overall performance, so you have to think about it all in a way that you don't for other film versions, I think.
Yeah, I was very happy to see how much Batman was in a Batman movie. Very happy with that. And I think and I love what they do. They talked about this, what's his name? Film critic, Chris Stuckman, when he reviewed his movie on YouTube, he said something that he really enjoyed was you will often hear Batman before you see Batman. And they really play on the sound and the shadow. Because he says that in his opening monologue, they think I'm in the shadows, but I am the shadows. And quite a few times in the film, you will hear him before you see him. And I think that, that ramped up the intimidation factor for me. But I don't know if we're going to get to this later, but I really liked this Batman, but Pattinson did not sell Bruce Wayne for me. I did not buy him as Bruce Wayne. I thought he was a brat, and he had the most punchable face in the movie.
Yeah, we were kind of saying the same thing, but I don't know. Like, now I'm wondering, is this like a comic book thing, or is this my preconceptions from the Nolan films? Because Bruce Wayne in the Nolan films is charismatic, swanky,
Yeah.
And is that my impression? So therefore, who the hell is this guy? He's not Bruce Wayne at all, or
he wasn't really given much to do in the film as Bruce Wayne. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like, because the film was very Batman focused, there was no lavish ball. That also wasn't the tone of the film. Him suddenly turning up as a playboy with 3 women on his own would be really jarring, having watched the other 3 hours.
And they didn't talk about the business. They didn't talk about, there were no guests at the house. So you're right. Like, we were not looking at any other aspect of life except Batman.
They mentioned the accountants at the beginning. I could only keep them off for so long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they do visit, but we cut away before we actually see Bruce Wayne meeting the accountants, because it's not the focus of the film. I mean, I think in terms of the comics, and Stephen, you'd know more, but thinking about like the year one comic series, for example, I mean, you see the suave, charismatic Bruce Wayne later on. I think once he sort of developed his Batman persona a bit more. So at this point, he's really kind of messed up, and he's kind of suicidal, and doesn't care.
Well, yeah, and I think that also when the director not Christopher Nolan, Matt Reeves, when he chose to use that Nirvana song, "Something in the Way," that's very fitting, because there is something in the way of Bruce Wayne moving on with his life, and he thinks Batman can do that. He thinks Batman can help that, but there's something in the way of Bruce Wayne dealing with the death of his parents and the fallout of that. And I thought that the song choice is great. I think it's interesting too that they bookend it. They bookend the movie with it.
And it was in the trailer as well.
I like the play on words there too, of like there's something in the way, as in it's stopping him from moving forward, but also the way that he goes about his life. There's something in the way that you're deciding to move with this.
Yes.
And he did say he was also kind of inspired by Kurt Cobain in this character of Batman, that he took a lot of that characterization and put it into Robert Pattinson's version.
Yeah.
Quick aside, I think I fixed the chat. I'm sorry, I had that disabled apparently. So if somebody could check, if you're able to chat, I would be grateful. But yeah, so yeah, I think that's really interesting to pull that out and bring in the Nirvana element. That does lead us pretty well into talking about the music too. So I don't know if you want to geek out about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, just a quick point. It's usual that when, I mean, you were talking about this recently, Maggie, on Other Minds and Hands. The trailer is the trailer and the film is the film. Well, here, actually, I think Matt Reeves has done an amazing job of setting the tone really early on. So I had to look up when the first teaser was. I think it was February 2020. And that was a kind of screen test of Robert Pattinson's costume. It was black and red. And we heard the now iconic don, 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 almost like a funeral dirge Batman theme, which I was worried that it was going to get very repetitive. A bit like the Wonder Woman wail in Zack Snyder's Justice League, which by the end of it sounds like her ringtone, like, oh, you know, Wonder Woman's got another text message. But it wasn't overused in the final film, and yet it was also still right in that very first, not even a teaser, just a screen test that was released for the fans. And then DC Fandom 2020, which this poster commemorates, released an early trailer which had Nirvana, Something in the Way, as its main song. And I'm so used to seeing like the perfect song in a trailer, and it's nowhere in the finished film. So I was so pleased to see that in the finished film as well. And there must, you know, you mentioned the relationship between Matt Reeves and the composer. They must have a really good relationship, because usually the composer comes in, they get parachuted in right at the end, you know, a month before the film is finished, right? Or something like that. That's what it feels like. And they score the finished film. Whereas this time it's really kind of a much more collaborative process, because we had that main Batman theme so early and it was released for the fans. And I really appreciate that. And
I know Robert Pattinson has said in interviews that he would listen to Giacchino's theme over and over and over to help him get into the, you know, just the mindset of the character. Joaquin Phoenix did the same thing when he was filming Joker, and he would listen to Hildur Gudnadottir's theme over and over and over to help him get into the mindset. There he is, Batman.
Yeah. Jim Lee poster showing Robert Pattinson as
so
Batman.
Cool.
So cool. And the black and red sort of symbolism, the coloring, which is again in the film throughout. And this was released in, so when was for DC Fandom? It was like kind of July 2020 or something. So quite a long time before the film came out, but they'd filmed maybe about a third of it, and then they released that poster.
We'll bring this back up too, because I think we've got a red and black slide here, don't we? Or is it these guys? Yeah, you do have that imagery throughout. And the reveal of the suit, I thought, was a really big deal. We've been talking a lot about that, you know, the humanizing thing of Batman, that this felt super low tech Batman. Like the only real fancy pants tech was stuff that was really expensive, or the contact lenses that seemed to be able to do everything. There wasn't a lot else. Like his car was a souped up car. His suit was made of leather. And I was reading about that, and they were talking about it being like a Russian soldier pressure suit. So it had laced up sides and elastics so people could move, so Batman could move. And the cape, or the flying suit being made of complete leather. So there's just some real like human elements about it. And the vest was based off of an equestrian protective vest. So it had pleats and pieces in it that would bend and flex like a soldier's outfit, really. We had some comments about the cape, but
yeah, we actually liked the cape.
Yeah,
it's like it's almost cast like the top quarter already has the lines in it, and then the movement is below that. And every time you saw it in shot, which is usually at night anyway, and wet, it looked stunning. It always looked like it was in movement.
Yeah.
And then it also looked in. It could have just been the way it was, that it wasn't cut straight, and at the bottom it's cut at an angle, which then gives it that impression that it's also like there's some movement going on.
So visually, just really striking.
Yeah, really. I think the cape was really good. That's the silly thing to go. Oh, the cape was nice.
You notice it. And this shot, the bottom one I've got here, the upside down reflection when the car is flipped over. Absolutely love that, and the movement of the cloak, but just the silhouette of the Batman. And I think this was the first suit that also had non-connected headpiece, so he could fully turn his head.
Dark Knight has that.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Dark Knight had that.
Yeah.
All right.
Because it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. The old Michael
Yeah.
Keaton, can't even move.
Yeah, the neck brace
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's and just the slide that we just had, the bat suit silhouetted by the fire, the city. We get a lot of that in the movie, and those little snippets that they do there, it makes it feel like a comic book, like it's jumping out of the pages.
Yeah.
And that's the director of photography, Greg Fraser, Dune, Rogue One, Zero Dark 30. He is not afraid to let that camera linger and get those good shots, those wide shots. I mean, oh my gosh, it was I think as far as Batman films, other than the Snyderverse, this is the best looking Batman movie.
I think I'd agree with that. I mean, Nolan is right up there for me, but visually and how it relates to like a comic book, I love that. I mean, we don't have a lot of color in this film. It's a small palette, which has a lot of impact. And some of these shots, you're right, he just holds them. I've done a bit in Other Minds and Hands where you talk about the average shot is 3 to 5 seconds. And if it stays in anything longer than 5 seconds, there's something you're supposed to notice. And these establishing shots, I haven't timed them, but I would guess they're 8 to 10 seconds. I mean, they really do hold that out.
Yeah. It's the opposite of Taken 3, which every shot is 1 second long. And I've never wanted to leave a theater faster.
And that it also sort of lends itself to the film noir aesthetic, which is an older, film noir is sort of classic, 40s and 50s really. I used to, if you think about The Third Man, the ending shot of that is just this long, incredibly long shot of just a person walking away. You kind of get that sort of feel with some of the shots in the Batman.
Yeah, and speaking of noir, Giacchino's Catwoman theme could be straight out of the 30s, any 30s film.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first heard that, I was sitting in my car and I had just had this image of Selena Kyle, leaning out her deck, looking over the city on a dark, rainy night with like a glass of scotch. And she's just like, I wish I could be anywhere else right now. I don't want to be here. And just that, oh man, he nailed it. He got it. He just captured that longing that we should have seen more in Selena Kyle, but it was right out of the 30s and 40s. He did such a good job, and he originally had more to that Catwoman theme. He had saxophones and all kinds of stuff, and I'm so glad that they scaled that back down. So we got this beautiful melody. He plays it on the piano and the strings, and that's really all that we needed, and it was perfect.
That's great. Let's talk about Selena Kyle as a character. Her plot wise, what do you think about her role, and then maybe performance and overview? General thoughts on Selena Kyle?
I think Catwoman is often a what you might call a gray character. Not really an anti-hero, not really a villain, not necessarily good. Batman's kind of like that, but he's much more, trying to be good, lawful good maybe, or I don't know, chaotic good. And then Selena Kyle is more kind of like chaotic neutral or true neutral, to use Dungeons and Dragons terms. What I think often happens with Catwoman and Batman is a lot of conflict between them. And there is this idea in narrative that you've got to have conflict, and the more conflict you have, the better. You always have characters who are fighting, arguing with each other. R2-D2 and C-3PO, they're always bickering. Catwoman and Batman kind of always at odds. You get that in the Christopher Nolan films. He's always trying to convince her to do stuff. And I liked how they were working together more on this film. There was much less conflict between them than you might have seen in other adaptations. And kind of much less conflict in general, actually. I mean, that as a general point about this film, it wasn't really about opposing forces. Even the Riddler was trying to work with Batman and thought he was working with Batman. It's more about just trying to solve this mystery, and then it comes to a lot of conflict right at the end. But it wasn't kind of all the way through this argument or this kind of this opposing forces sort of thing. So I enjoyed that aspect of the relationship between Bruce and Selena, or Batman and Catwoman.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen we either needed Catwoman or we needed Carmine Falcone. We did not need both. And because there's, the movie goes along, and then we have to stop for 30 minutes and tell Catwoman's story and then get back to the Riddler. I think that she would have been a fantastic ally, and she is a fantastic ally in this movie, whether she wanted to be or not. As far as like her performance, I think that Zoe Kravitz, again, like I said, with the music, she really captures what it would be like to live in the slums of Gotham. Like, you could tell as she's struggling. You can see the hardships in her face when she talks. And even sometimes, when she doesn't have her wig on, which is like a whole different persona, you can see that she sometimes will just be very, she'll hold her hands closer to herself, and she's not as expressive as she would be. The dynamic between the two was great. Even though Batman was just like, I'm going to intentionally put you in harm's way to accomplish my goals, whatever. I really would have liked to have seen more of the team up, and I hope we get more of that in the sequel, regardless of the fact that she did try to kill a cop by kicking him off the roof. She is a great character.
Cop.
Dirty cop, yes.
Yeah.
Dirty cop. But I do think, I really hope she comes back for a sequel, and I really hope she has a bigger part in a bigger story arc too. I'd like to see that. But she really did. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I think taking your point about her, either Carmine Falcone or her, I think they should have done what they did with the Penguin, where she was in the film, but just enough where you're like, I want to see her character again. And I came away, I'm sure we'll discuss the Riddler later, but I came away wanting to see more of the Penguin, definitely less of the Riddler. And I wasn't, there's certain things that happened with her in the plot that I just was like, she wouldn't do that. Not this early in
Like what?
Like the kiss. The kiss was just what? Really?
Also, I'm like, I have to harp on this. Also, because I was 100% convinced they were going to show her as a lesbian.
Yeah.
Because her concern for her friend Agnieszka, I think that was her name, Annika, was so strong, and she kept calling her baby, and they were really affectionate in face to face. So at no point did I question that she would be into him. So when the kiss did happen, there had been no hint of sexual chemistry or any sort of flirtation, and then it just felt wrong and like kissing your brother.
Well, it could be that she's trying to manipulate him to get him to help her come back on Carmine, because she does. She wants. I think she does ask him like help me do this, and then let's get we'll go away together. We can leave this place.
Maybe it's manipulation.
It could be manipulation. It could have been.
I just think Batman's kind of sexy in this film, and if you're in that situation, sure, you'd go and lean in for a snog. I think she's, I think she's probably bisexual. I mean, I think I agree about your point about roommates, which I would have liked to have seen a bit more of. I mean, if you're going to have a bisexual character, have a bisexual character, right? And if she's kissing Batman, she should kiss her friend as well. I've forgotten her friend's name, but Yeah, and then you know her friend dies, and she's kind of upset, but then it kind of the plot moves on quite quickly. So I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that, and that might have explained her chemistry or lack of with
exactly. And
Batman
like maybe it just feels unresolved to me because there was like an element where she was sitting down talking to all of the dirty cops and stuff, and then somebody mentioned her friend. And they ran off together, and he was like, no, stay there, ask those questions. And she's like, no, I only care about my friend. I told you that. Yeah. So her drive seemed so strong for her own purposes, and then it just kind of petered out. Once her friend was dead, she didn't seem to be that engaged in that anymore. That was it.
She unzips the bag. There's the body in there. She goes, oh well, takes a bag of money and disappears.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm over it.
And with you, like if you're gonna have a bisexual character, then just lean into it. I thought she was gonna be depicted as a lesbian, and I was thrilled that it wasn't a song and dance. It was like, oh look, I love this person. It's not like, oh look, I have a character that is bisexual.
And if we take on Stephen's point earlier about she's manipulating Batman, I don't think it was implicit enough, but there is an argument to be made that maybe she wasn't in a relationship with the other girl, and she was manipulating the other girl to get information against Carmine. And all the way through, she just uses, but there's not enough in there for us to go.
And wouldn't it be nicer if those seeds were sown that we can see that later? So we can go, ooh, but I don't know if that was strong enough.
But then that would fit in with the character.
Yeah.
Or at least the comic version of the character where, she does almost whatever she wants to get whatever she needs. And it doesn't matter who's in the way. She's not a complete maniac. But
and that would tack on another 30 to 40 minutes of this already very long movie.
Like, do we even need to talk about the length? It was an hour and a half too long. Maybe 45 minutes. If like, I'll fight for that. But like, I think
it wasn't long enough in my opinion. I just like I've never felt less bored in anything. I just loved it. I loved feeling, with the nice thing about long films is that you kind of feel like you're in the film. So I actually rewatched it for this and dreamt I was in the film afterwards. I loved it. More the merrier. And I think, it is pretty slow. I mean, it takes its time with the detective story. That is the heart of this. We'll see. Maybe we'll see more character development in sequels, and maybe we'll judge it differently then.
We should probably actually say a little bit like what the plot is, right? We haven't actually said much about that. So, we've already said spoilers. You guys are in it to win it. But yeah, I mean, I guess like one of the main takeaways of this plot is that there isn't a good and a bad, right? Like everyone's kind of walking this line. Like cops are supposed to be the good guys that protect you, and they're not in this. And the Riddler and the Batman are almost two sides of the same line. And I think that's definitely how the Riddler sees it, is trying to, align himself with him. But the Batman is working with the cops thinking he's doing good, and the Riddler is just on the other side causing a bit of chaos.
What we see in the beginning as well, going back to Gabriel on about that, there's a scene from the trailer where he says, I am vengeance. He beats up all those guys. And then the guy that he's supposed to be rescuing is equally petrified of him as is of the other guys. And this is a guy that's meant to have been being the Batman for 2 years and admits himself that like things aren't working. So the chances are, knowing his detective skills, which we know are shocking, but we'll discuss that later, he's probably beaten up the wrong guy quite a few times.
That's true too. Maybe he just sucks at this sometimes, but clearly Gordon sees some promise in him. Well, the thing I'm referring to is like that clue about the flying rat.
Oh, what's that? Yeah, like
it's a freaking bat, people. How many hours did that take?
And he's meant to be the world's greatest detective. He outwits Superman.
Well, and Penguin even mocks him for that too.
Yeah.
And we get to see the little penguin shuffle as he hops off screen.
So do you think there was a purpose in him being bad at that? Do you think that's showing him? I thought that was a failure of script. I'm curious if you think that's more of a character development.
Yeah, I think they just it just almost seemed like, hey, we gotta tie this in somehow. So bad Spanish, here we go. That's
I don't know if anyone else agrees, because we had a conversation about this. Like the Riddler's riddles were far too easy. Like anyone.
Yeah, but I don't. When you've got like a bomb thing on your head, they're pretty difficult. Like under pressure, and Batman was quite quick at solving them.
That's true. I mean, when somebody asks me to like spell out my address on the phone, I can never come up with what an L stands for. If I had a bomb on my head, I'm pretty sure.
and I think some of it. I mean, the URL Gatto. I mean, the URL. That's pretty clever. I thought the whole point about the rat with wings is that it does actually mean Falcone, because that's the one that they're pointing at. It is a, up, and it could be Penguin, it could be Falcone, it could be Batman. I would have thought Batman, and I'm sure the thought crossed his mind as well, but it doesn't really make sense because he's not the focus of that riddle at that point, is he? It is supposed to point to Falcone, I thought, because he is the actual person in charge of this whole operation.
Well, he was the rat. He ratted out Maroni. Yeah.
So he is a rat with wings in the sense, but then a falcon isn't really a rat with wings, whereas a bat is. So it is a bit kind of unclear. Yeah. But then my feeling is, and this is often true with the Riddler in comics as well, his riddles aren't very good. And riddles in general aren't very good as well. Like there's always multiple answers to them. And that's kind of the point. Like he's a bit kind of obnoxious in that sense. So it worked for me.
So I don't want to get too far off this, but I remember first time seeing this in the theater when he ends up in a prison cell next to what we can assume to be the Joker. I really wanted his response to be when Joker gives him that riddle, like the more or the less you have, the more valuable they are. I really wanted Riddler to be like, what? Like, come on, man. You're the Riddler. You didn't get it? Come on.
But there's so many answers to that riddle as well. Like that's what I mean about these riddles always.
Yeah, books, beer, it could be anything.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, I got distracted.
One other point, I don't know if anyone's mentioned it, is that like beyond the sequence right at the end of the mayor, does the Batman have any influence on the events that happen throughout the film? Like the Riddler's plan all the way to blowing up the wall will have happened whether or not Batman was there or not. All those people will have died whether or not Batman was there or not. Yeah.
So do you think that if Riddler hadn't involved Batman with that first card, would he have even cared that politicians were dying?
Right. Would he have gotten involved in this at all?
Is it Raiders of the Lost Ark, where if Indiana Jones isn't in the film, the same sequence of events still happens? Basically, he doesn't. But basically, up until the bit where you've got those really inept people with guns who fail to miss someone 20 feet below them when they're trying to shoot the mayor, so-called clean mayor. Like he doesn't have any influence on what happens. People still die. Corrupt people still carry on doing what they're doing. And he's just like, he is actually ineffectual after 2 years.
Yeah, but it depends what you think the heart of the story is. So if the heart of the story is that stuff about the murders and people dying and the seawalls exploding and so on, then Batman has no influence on that plot. And that's a problem narratively. But actually, if the heart of the story, if this plot is really not about those external things, but it's an internal narrative, it is about 100%. Batman's development, Robert Bat, Bruce Wayne realizing that actually he's creating the Riddler. He's doing more harm than good, and he needs to change. And also he needs to realize that there are people in his life that he loves and that he wants to protect. And so in that sense, all his actions and all the actions that he reacts to do have a profound influence by the end, and leads up to that beautiful ending, I think, when he's carrying the boy. In fact, actually, it's the mayor's son again, I think. And he's a kind of like, finally, we're seeing Batman as an action hero, as a superhero, which we haven't seen much of at all, ever. I mean, in general, for me, this felt like I was a child again, and I was playing with my action figures. And we have like, just so many things I loved. Batman in a nightclub. I just love it. I just love seeing Batman in a nightclub. Is brilliant. 10 out of 10. Batman like controlling Selena Kyle through the weird eye things. Batman in the police compound being surrounded by cops. Very similar to like something from the Arkham games as well.
It's like, you punched me in the face.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have just all these just gorgeous situations, which is why I found the film so joyful, even though it's not a film with a lot of lighthearted moments. And then you get Batman at the end, who's like rescuing people and being this superhero, which again is like a kind of very childlike idea of Batman. But I loved it. It kind of went, pierced my youthful heart and got rid of all my cynicism, even though I wasn't actually a Batman fan as a child because of Joel Schumacher, but it still kind of reverted me to that age. And I think that for me, that was the actual story. And so it made sense to me as a narrative journey.
Well, yes, I agree with what you're saying, and I like that. What I wish we could have had, if there's one thing I would have changed, there's a lot of things I would have changed. There's one thing I would have changed, it would have been the ending. We didn't need Batman and Catwoman driving off into the sunset. What we needed was, after the flooding and everything, we needed Bruce Wayne to go to Mayor Real and say, you told me once I should be doing more with my family's legacy. I'm here to partner with you. I'm here to bring hope to Gotham. And I'm not talking about the city. I'm talking about its people. Gotham is a people. And I see that now. And I see that I can make a difference. Like, can I help you do this? Like, that's the ending I wanted to see. In addition to that just extraordinary shot of, as the little kid's being airlifted, and she just doesn't want to let go of Batman, like that. Like, yeah, going back to that theme, something in the way, like, this is your chance to move past that now, because Gotham needs Batman and it needs Bruce Wayne.
I think I would have liked that too, because that my one note complaint that would have solved that if we had just a little glimmer of him accepting a different mantle and saying, what I was doing wasn't working. We're going to try this.
Yes.
And I have all these resources that I'm not tapping into.
Yeah.
Let's play that card. And yeah, that absolutely would have shown interest for the next film. So like, it would have piqued your interest for a sequel and been like, ooh, something different. But it really would have shown that progression. Going off into the sunset with Catwoman, I was vomiting by that point. Like, no. Yeah.
We hear like the good, the bad, and the ugly theme in the background.
Yeah. And I just really struggled with the pacing of the third act. It just felt like they threw all the things at the wall and hoped something stuck. And timing wise, I like wanted a stopwatch as things started flooding. And I was like, this doesn't work. Like, none of those things would happen. But Gabriel, I'm also so glad to hear your perspective, because if you suspend all of my practical brain, it's a lot of fun, So like, I am glad to hear that reaction of like,
yeah. And
obviously everybody loved it. The 88% rating is not something to be sniffed at.
And we needed that tunnel gunfight scene. Holy cow, man, that looks so good. And that's when and I loved, like, that's when Giacchino cranked that volume up to 11 and broke the knob off with that Batman theme, because he came in loud and boisterous, and there was no, we're not going to rest to the note. It's bum 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 bum, and you can feel like as they're pounding on the drums, Batman is pounding the snot out of these people. It was just an intense 15 seconds.
Yeah. Very impactful.
Out of interest, do you think the finale, as it appears, is in keeping with the tone of the rest of the film? Because that's my biggest thing that I really was like, the explosion, all the rest of the ridiculousness. It just felt like it got in front of a committee who said, there's not enough explosions in it. We need a big finale, because it's been so like 7 all the way through, like the
7 the film, or
7 the serial killers, like, we're stalking this guy, we're eventually going to catch him one way or another, and then we get this big ridiculous. And I know it's the Riddlers was like, oh, I'm sort of washing the streets, free of the filth and all the rest of that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was just a bit, after having so sort of low key all the way through, to then have this rather ridiculous thing at the end. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thing that a lot of films have trouble with, the third act. I mean, the Star Trek films as well, they and J.J. Abrams' work quite generally sort of does descend into just punching people on a train by the third act, because I do think you need a big explosion, right? You need wake up, this is the end of the film, we're seeing something different, we're in a different context. These are the effects of Act 1 and 2. Like, this is what Act 1 and 2, the consequences of that, and this is how these characters are reacting to it. And the main character should sort of go through a doorway that they can't go back from. They should do something that they weren't doing in the first two acts. So it should feel different. It shouldn't feel too glaring. And I think that may very well be an issue with this film. Very difficult to solve that because it is such a beautifully sort of slow-paced story. Maybe it should have been a TV series. Maybe that would have been better, and then you wouldn't have had to had such a explosive third act. But again, it comes down to, does it work for you? And when I rewatched this film on Friday night, when we got to the flooding and everyone's in that big convention center, and then you see the explosions up in the ceiling, and then Batman comes through, and I literally stood up and I clapped and I cheered. I know I'm very sad, but I live on my own.
I love it.
But I was like, it's Batman! He's coming through the ceiling. There's explosions everywhere. He's kicking ass. I love it. I love it. This is what I want to see. This makes me happy. And it gave it to me. Like, I thought it was great fan service. So, I'm not being very objective or cerebral as you both are.
I don't really want
but
you
it
to
worked.
be
It worked for me.
Good.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, my go-to movies are action movies, and so like I want to see things blow up. Like I'm fine with that. I do think though, I mean, if it seemed a little, if that whole scene felt a little off, it's because there was a piece missing, and it was the Batman, because Batman, Riddler thought that Batman was going to join his side. And so we don't know what Batman's role would have been in that whole process. Riddler manipulated him through riddles and such, but he kind of counted on Batman joining his side. And so we don't know what Batman would have done to bring about this kind of catastrophe on Gotham, and what he would have done going forward. I do like that. I do like the way that they use light in this movie for such a dark character. At some of his more mellow points in the film, not only is he a little bit more in the light, but you also hear the Bruce Wayne theme instead of the Batman theme. And so I thought that was very cool when Batman jumps down into the water and he lights his flare, and he is leading people out with the light. He is that light that people follow. And it's very cool that it was the mayor's son that took his hand first. I thought that was very important for Bruce Wayne's growth, to see that he could make a difference.
Yeah, and foreshadowing what Robin, perhaps, especially the way that the mayor's son is introduced as playing. I mean, it's right at the start of the film, after the title, The Batman. You think you're seeing the young Bruce Wayne with Alfred, but it's actually the mayor and his son. And so, I mean, he's not Dick Grayson. He's not sort of that background, but Robin has there's so many different Robins, and even if it's not like this is setting up a Robin for a future film, it's setting up that kind of relationship, I think.
Go ahead.
I definitely take on board what you're saying about the mayor's son and the through line. I absolutely think that's what he needs to be there for, and shows that character growth. And I love the idea that we're kind of laying that foundation potentially for a Robin, but it just felt so smashed over my head. I probably could have seen it 3 times and not 7. I mean, every time there was some rescue happening, or some hand being grabbed, or some eyes being locked, it was the mayor's son. So I think I just got tired by the end, and I just got annoyed by all of it. So I made a culpa. I'm sorry, but
I think it's a really attractive thing of the Batman character, is that he beats thugs to pulp, but he's like a little kid basically. So when he looks at that child, he sees himself. He's never really changed from that moment. He's still that little child inside, and I think that was really captured really well.
Can I do one more complaint, and then I'll stop being negative Nancy? How he treats Alfred.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That relationship, first of all, like we were saying, it wouldn't matter if Batman was in this or not, because Alfred solved all the ciphers. Like, Batman didn't do any of that. That was all Alfred. And the way he treated him was just god awful. And when he wakes up in the hospital and he just like is pissed at him.
You lied to me.
Yeah. I was like, no. I mean, I understand being a cranky teenager, but this felt next level to me. This man raised you. This has been your your heart and your soul. And
he also makes the jibe about the cufflinks. You're not a Wayne.
Yeah. Like, talk about a low dig. Like, your parents died 18 years ago. Why are you still so angry and directly at him? Gabriel's laughing.
Yeah.
You're like, nah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I just love it. It's just like this is. I love that relationship. I really like Andy Serkis as Alfred Pennyworth. It reminded me of Sean Pertwee's version from the Gotham series. It's quite a similar kind of grisly kind of. It has heart, but it also has edge. Whereas like Michael Caine's Alfred is just heart. It's just kind of, he's on the verge of tears at all times. I mean, I don't know. Let's see where this is going. I think in sequels, if Bruce Wayne is much nicer to Alfred, then this justifies this approach. If he's still a brat, then if it's still a brat, then I totally agree.
Sarah's commenting in the chat here. First of all, Sarah said, really love the musical details that Stephen's bringing up. So thanks, Stephen, for bringing all those things in. But she asks, is it because Andy Serkis isn't as lovable and cuddly as Michael Caine?
I think he's pretty lovable and cuddly.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely lovable and he's quite endearing. He's just a little bit gruffer, and I'm kind of okay with that.
Well, yeah, think about, I mean, watching them interact was like I've definitely spoken to my father in that kind of tone before. And I'm lucky he didn't, kick me out of the house. You go fend for yourself. He was being a jerk, not my dad, Batman. Bruce was being a jerk to Alfred, but I came to see that as, this is a father and son dynamic. And we have this angsty teenager letting off steam on his father figure, and his father figure is big enough to just take it.
Yeah. And I mean, how old is Bruce Wayne in this? Well, he's like mid-20s, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, 28. So he's like 25. Do we know he's 28?
Yeah.
How do we know that?
I don't think they say it in the film, but I think it was in quite a few of the articles.
Okay.
So it might have been in the IMDb profile.
I mean, I think the idea with that kind of, becoming an orphan at such a young age, it kind of, stops the clock with his mental development. And he sort of remains a child, and he doesn't really get to grow up much. He doesn't. So he's really is kind of a teenager. He's just got the man of a 28-year-old.
That's a really fair point. Yeah, teenage keeping journals, having kind of a stunted emotional growth, not having anyone that can put him in, and not having anyone that can. No one can put him in line because he's the head of the household. He's the billionaire around town. Alfred's probably the only one that can talk to him like that, but he doesn't feel like he has to listen to him like that.
But also Alfred is the butler. So Alfred always, and Robert Pattinson, Bruce Wayne says, "You're not my father," and he isn't, and he can't actually, he could never say, "Go to your room, Bruce." Yeah. Because he's actually there to help. So it's always a difficult relationship. Not that I have that many tears to shed for the billionaires with butlers, but losing your parents, whoever you are, is traumatic and
well, you do also have the deference of it. You do also have the deference of everybody that sees Bruce Wayne in town. Oh, look, it's Bruce Wayne. He's still like that recluse, but also celebrity type figure. No one's going to be able to talk to him like a real person. He doesn't have that in his life. All right, you helped explain some of that relationship to Andy Serkis, but that doesn't mean I like it.
It's a very different Alfred, or a relationship with Alfred, than we've seen in other versions. Jeremy Irons is very much like sort of a wisecracking Michael Caine, who doesn't give two Fs, as it were. But then Ben Affleck's meant to be a lot older, isn't he? It's like on the twilight years, as it were. Yeah. So it's just different.
Speaking of differences, we also had a question earlier that I'll just bring in. What's the relation of film Batman to comic Batman? Is there some concept of continuity within this film, or is it a pretty total rethink of the character? She says, I'm pretty clueless about the comics and always wonder if there's a strong connection between the comic and the film. So I'm not as familiar with the comics, but how do you guys think this Batman compares to the comic book Batman?
It's running the year 1, year 2 timeline, isn't it, really?
So they used quite a few sources for this movie. Matt Reeves, especially when he was writing, of course they went to year 1. Of course he went to Long Halloween. If you I'm trying to think what the other ones are. I've got them right here. Batman Earth One by Jeph Johns. That's a huge influence. And actually, I think that's where they get their inspiration for Alfred in this one. A little more gruff, a little more, rough around the edges. Yeah, I mean, this Batman kind of feels like they took some of the Dark Knight Detective from the late 30s, early 40s, and sprinkled in some of the angsty, angry Batman from the 80s, Frank Miller's Batman, and kind of put it together. I mean, it's Batman, like all of his villains, Batman has to speak to the audience that he's appearing before. Batman has to adjust and adapt to his readers and to his film audience. And I think what they've done as far as taking the comic books and adapting it to film, I mean, they've done a good job. They've captured a character, but they've also, he's not just a cookie cutter character. They've added things. They've added that, the way that he speaks to Alfred, and the way that he, even the technology he uses, where they put the Batcave, cool. His motivations. I mean, it's the same character, but he's different. And that's good writing. We, as long as they keep doing that, like bring on the Batman. But yeah, that's the number one, the number one source was the comics. And I don't know if this has anything to do with the question, but I'm also very glad that we've never seen a film adaptation of any of the comics. Like the year one. We haven't had a year one movie. We don't have a Long Halloween movie. I don't want to see that. I already know how that story ends.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
There's animated versions, I guess, of like the Killing Joke and stuff like that. But yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I want people who don't read the comics to be able to watch these movies and have an idea, to walk away like, oh, I think I understand who this character is. And I think I can connect with this character in this way. And I think this film does that pretty well.
I also think that's such a strength about transmedia, that you've got all these different things that you can tap into. So your knowledge from the comics leads into your enjoyment of the film, which is influenced by your knowledge of the cartoons and all these things. You don't have to replicate each other. And I think that's one of the faultings of adaptation. When somebody tries to perfectly replicate a work, it never works that way. So, take in the media that you have access to and play with it, because then you do just get to enjoy more time in that world. Because when you were talking to Gabriel earlier about, I didn't care that it was 3 hours, I would have sat there longer. I just loved, being there. That's how I felt with The Hobbit, of all things. Like that's a whole other lecture series of, I didn't really like the Hobbit films, but it's more time in Middle Earth. I get to hang out there. That was fun. I'm happy to go back to Middle Earth. Sure.
Yeah, and I think this did a great job of selling Gotham. I mean, I want to move to Gotham after watching this film, which I know is crazy, but I do.
They need to get a better garbage service first, and then you can go.
Yeah, but I think it's because we haven't seen Gotham for quite a while. Like we see snatches of it in the Snyderverse, but blink and you miss it. And Christopher Nolan's Gotham was basically just Chicago, past Batman Begins. So I really enjoyed that that world building that they did. And just to respond to Sarah's question, I mean, I thought Gotham by Gaslight was also another kind of influence, which was an animated series. Very much the costume, this weird thing that goes around the neck, the kind of the leather stitched aspect of Batman's suit, and the Batman Arkham games as well. The way the thugs all dressed up in like Halloween makeup at the start of the film is very much like Arkham games, where they all sort of look the same and they say it's the Bat as you swoop in. And yeah, just I think there was enough in there that as someone who's read comics and played games and stuff, I see stuff that looks familiar, but it isn't a straight up copy of any story, which I agree with you, Stephen, is a good thing.
And I mean, for people like us that are reading the comics, I mean, man, the Easter eggs, that just elevates the movie for me. The Two-Face Easter egg, the Hush Easter egg, the Joker Easter egg that wasn't an Easter egg because he was in the movie. All these little, even before we were recording, I was like, did anybody catch that Penguin was introduced in purple plaid because that was his first appearance, was in purple plaid. Like, do you need to read the comics to enjoy the movies? No, but You should read the comics. You should read the comics. Read the source material. Absolutely.
So, just out of curiosity, do you think this movie would make people go out and buy comics, Batman comics?
I hope so.
I think so, because I'm not a comics person. I don't know if the movie would make me read the comics, but you guys talking about this makes me want to read the comics. So like, I guess there's enough in it that as long as somebody points it out to me, I'd be more engaged with reading those specific ones.
Well, Gabriel, what are like maybe the 2 or 3 comics that you would recommend for people that don't read comics, so they've seen the movie? What are some of the ones that were influential for you?
I mean, I think Batman Year One is a good kind of intro. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I don't know, because I would say just pick up any Batman comic, just the nearest one available to you. I think they're all good. I think as long as it's a Batman solo comic, I mean, I think Batman in the Justice League is a whole different issue because he basically just hangs back and makes the tea. But in general, you know, if it's a Batman solo comic, if you're already a comic book fan and you like Judge Dredd, there's some fantastic crossover comics between Batman and Judge Dredd, which I would also really recommend. And yeah, the Judge Dredd, Batman, and Rorschach from Watchmen are all kind of similar characters. So if you like any one of those, then definitely read the others.
Love watching all 3 of you go, yeah.
It's amazing.
We should do the Dredd movie, just saying.
Well, I could be the next one. I did just want to pull this up. We were talking about makeup and costuming. So this is Colin Farrell, the guy that plays the Penguin, and is utterly unrecognizable.
It's incredible.
Apparently, they were doing the test runs for the makeup, and he would just go to different Starbucks in the full makeup, and nobody recognized him, and he got a lot of dirty looks from people, which I quite liked. And then we didn't really talk about Gordon, and we haven't actually talked about the Riddler. So I want to just kind of touch on those 2 peripheral characters in our last 5-10 minutes. Any thoughts that you want to share? I really enjoyed Gordon here, but I don't feel like he had a lot. Like, I think he's still young in his career too, and he just felt more like a narrative element to move story along. There wasn't a character arc. There wasn't a lot of growth from A to B.
Yeah, I mean, he's putting his neck on the line for Batman, and that's kind of justified by the end of it. He's the one non-dirty cop. I thought he was as good as Gary Oldman in the Batman Begins, you know, and that character developed more in the sequel. So let's wait and see. There was supposed to be a spin-off TV series for Jeffrey Wright. Maybe that's still happening. That's kind of up in the air. And he wasn't going to be in the Batgirl film. That was going to be J.K. Simmons reprising his role from Justice League. And that's another kind of Jim Gordon who, you know, blink and you miss him, would have liked to have seen more of. And poor J.K. Simmons was like working out for the role and stuff. And he's hardly in anything. So, you know, I'd like to see more, but there were a lot of characters in this film. Yeah. I think it works, but I would like to see more of them to see them develop.
I think you're right that one of the best strengths of this character, though, is that relationship with the Batman. So that doesn't really falter throughout this film, and they're both kind of figuring it out together. So this could be seen as a very long foundation laying for what comes next.
Yeah, if we end up getting more Reeves Pattinson Batman movies, I would rather see a Batman Gordon team up than a Batman Robin team up, or Batman and anybody else. I really, really, really liked this incarnation of Jim Gordon. I really did.
What in particular?
I like that he kind of provided some of the humor as opposed to Batman. You know, when they go to the mayor's garage, walks in and just, damn, must be good to be the mayor. Like he provides some of that little comic relief that we need without compromising his character. You know, he's still a serious person, but he kind of says the things that maybe we as an audience would want to say. You know, and he takes a punch from Batman. I mean, that's something. I don't know. I don't punch my friends, I guess, but whatever. Yeah, I did. I thought they were I thought they balanced each other out, which is what Catwoman should have done, but did not really. So they did, but they didn't.
Do you think it's one of those things where all superhero films, it's like, because they've got the rights to all these characters, they're like, let's try and get as many of them into the film as possible, rather than just having, one of the great advantages of Batman, he's got such a great rogues gallery. And they're always like, we need to stick this in and this in and this in. That's what killed the Spider-Man franchise the first round, because like, we need to have this character, and you don't. Just need to have one really good villain and let the other characters grow as they move along. So by the time you get to your third film, you're really invested in what they're doing, and there's higher stakes available because you know these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Reeves was going for was a sense of the wider world. And he even has the Joker in there, and he justifies that by saying, I want people to know that the Riddler is just one of many. He's hinting at this wider world all the time, and Gotham kind of becoming a character in its own right. So I think that's what he was going for. I think that it is part of the appeal of Batman to have all these characters, and yeah, I'd love to see more. I mean, there's just so many great villains, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely one of the things that was so exciting when we started learning bits about this. When there was mention that the Penguin was going to be in it and Catwoman was going to be in it, we're like, really?
Yeah. We haven't seen Penguin for quite a while.
He's on baby duty, so baby's just woken up.
Yeah, we haven't seen him since 92 or 3 Batman Returns.
Yeah, except for Gotham, the TV series.
Oh, yep, that's correct.
Yeah,
I haven't finished that yet, so
okay.
I haven't seen it yet.
And this is a very different Penguin than that one. So, it's kind of nice to see a more realistic, again, humanized villain, because it's refreshing. Any thoughts on the Riddler you want to bring in? I mean, I feel like we've kind of touched on all of it, but
I liked I liked Paul Dano.
It's very creepy.
Yeah. I think he could almost have gone too far. The Jesse Eisenberg sort of Lex Luthor kind of crazy voice thing, and he does do that at times towards the end. But I mean, he's kind of like a TikTok villain, right? He's got all these followers and he's broadcasting, he's live streaming.
And he's gathering them to action, and he's getting reaction.
And there's a bit of the kind of the Tom Hardy Bane as well, with kind of the mask. So there's enough variety there, and there's a vulnerability to him which I really enjoyed. He's not like Riddler. I mean, someone in the comments, the Riddler in the Arkham games, that guy could do riddles. Yeah, I love the Riddler when he's like full-blown theatrical, orchestrating everything, doing these ridiculous games and stuff like that. We didn't see that. Maybe he's going to come back. Maybe he's going to be full-blown at some point. That would be fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, compare this to Jim Carrey.
Yeah, I mean, let's not maybe go full Jim Carrey. Let's go between Paul Dano and Jim Carrey.
Yeah. These are, but that's what's so fun about these adaptations, I mean, like, all of these things fit so well in the world of Batman in my mind, but they are so different. That's what's so cool.
Yeah. I would love to see like, I had this vision of like we get a multiverse movie, so like every incarnation of Batman and all these heroes, and I need the scene where Jim Carrey's Riddler comes prancing up to Ben Affleck's Batman and like starts monologuing, and then Batman just shoots him in the head and walks away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the camera pans down and the blood splatter is a question mark.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I enjoyed this Riddler. I was happy with how intense they made him and how terrifying they made him. And I thought it was interesting too. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think that there are a lot of camera shots and camera angles where the two mirror each other, because Riddler very easily could have been Batman and vice versa, very easily. They both had rough childhoods. They both went through something traumatic, and now they are both trying to do something for Gotham. Just they're going about it very different ways, and that's what.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
No, I was just gonna say that's especially when they're Riddler's looking through the binoculars in the beginning, and later on Bruce Wayne's creeping on Catwoman, and then just some of the moments where they're standing in the dark in the shadows and they're just kind of barely lit. They very easily could have been working together, and I think maybe Riddler, without knowing that was Bruce Wayne, maybe he he really did think that Batman was going to join his side. But I did, and you're right. He Riddler very easily could have just gone off the rails, and I thought that he was crazy enough and intimidating enough to make him a real threat. And I did feel threatened by this Riddler.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that was incredibly purposeful, and I was going to use the example you used about the binoculars and the creeper. That I think that was the point, right? Like they were really trying to show this center line and one on really close on either side of it, that they really could be almost interchangeable at points. And there were a few moments, because this isn't yet a fully formed Batman, he's just, that Batman, that there were a few points where you wondered if he was going to make the right decision. And by the end, you're also questioning what the right decision is, because everybody you thought was good was corrupt. And every review I was reading over the last couple of days too kept referring to the January 6th insurgent in the Capitol as this being kind of a parallel to that. So I understand that it's very difficult to take what we see on film away from what's happening in real life. But you can see all of these things kind of coming to fruition through this. Are they good? Are they bad? I don't know. Take it upon yourselves and let's get an army. I don't know. There was a lot in that I think was very purposeful. We want to show that there isn't necessarily a straight up villain. And that kind of turns superhero movies on their head, right? Like, he's not quite a superhero. He doesn't have all the tricks that we're used to. And that guy's not really a villain. He just thinks he's doing right, but then he kills people. So yeah, that's not good. But I liked the gray matter. I liked the gray space in all of these characters.
And maybe in the sequel, maybe all the characters will accomplish what they set out to do, because nobody accomplished their goals in this movie. Nobody.
No. So
like Batman didn't stop Riddler, Catwoman didn't kill Falcone, and Riddler didn't destroy the city, or the people didn't convert Batman. Nobody accomplished their goals.
So maybe this was just a really long exercise in world building.
It
that was very enjoyable, and we'll see. Yeah, and we'll see what comes to fruition around two.
Yeah, but I mean, Batman still rescues some people. I mean, it's a world in which it's not a fairy tale. Nothing's going to work out for everyone. It's messy, right? And Batman is messy. Like, he's helping out, but he's also making some things worse. But in general, he's a good thing. But it's kind of, there's grayness to everyone, and you take some accomplishments along the way. Like he saves some people's lives, and that's enough.
Excellent. I think we wrap it up there, but honestly, this feels like scratching the surface. So when's the next one come out? Like, I did actually think about us doing a shot-by-shot analysis type thing too, because I do think there's so many moments of this film that were just stunningly beautiful. You can do this kind of comparative to a film noir and this, or to, what we were saying, from comic book to this, that there just seems to be a lot of straight influence that you could do some analysis. But do we know when the next one comes out?
It's not been announced. It's not even been greenlit. And the latest news is that Ben Affleck is not only back in The Flash, if that's still being released, but also Ben Affleck's going to be in Aquaman 2, apparently. So, Ben Affleck was supposed to bow out in The Flash and be replaced by Michael Keaton, just to be even more confusing. So who knows what Warner Brothers is thinking. If they have any sense, they'll keep going with Robert Pattinson's Batman. I'd be very happy to keep seeing Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton as well. The more Batman, the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. And I do think it's a character that can work with multiple interpretations. Ben Affleck's Batman is very comic accurate as well, just different comic books to Robert Pattinson's Batman. And of course, Michael Keaton's Batman is an important classic as well.
Agreed. This lends itself really well to a lot of different interpretations. I was sad to see Batgirl getting nicked. I'm sure we'll see some more things come out. The main thing I keep hearing is about the cost of marketing. It's not worth it compared to
and it was like tax breaks or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It all seems to be financial, and I don't know. That doesn't quite jive with me either as a fan person, but I guess we'll see as time goes out if we get any of that later in the day. But there's a lot still coming. So we'll see you again soon, I hope, because this was really fun. So thank you guys for joining in. Gabriel, thank you for nominating this one. Anybody who ever wants to nominate a film for us to discuss, please feel free to do so. And also, Stephen came to us by me going out to Signum University and saying, who's a Bat fan? Who wants to join this chat? And one of our colleagues saying, I know somebody, and putting us in touch with Stephen. So Stephen, thank you for joining our merry crew.
Thank you.
And I hope to have you back sometime. You're fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation. It's nice to sit among fans and talk about one of the best comic book heroes of all time.
Well, may it happen again. Get your thinking caps on and we'll try for another one. But awesome. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you for the next Mythgard Movie Club.
Thank you so much, everyone. Great to see the comments in the chat as well.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your questions and comments.
Thanks then. Bye-bye. Oh, wow. God, I thought that was actually Batman for a second. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
we're recreating the Batmobile crash.
Amazing. Yeah.
Aw.
Dun, 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 dun.
That's such a good shot. My gosh. Anyways,
Aw.
Thanks then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
thanks.